Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel and part 6 I believe of this robin tutorial that we've been working through. So hopefully this part's going to be a little bit shorter than the previous, as we're just going to work on these two little feet that are kind of clasping onto the branch. For any of you that might be new here, I'm Becca. I'm a professional pet portrait and wildlife artist specialising in colour pencil drawings of animals. So to make a start then, I'm going to go in firstly with the palest colour that I can see in those feet. And they're quite like a deep, like a pinky warm brown tone, I'd say. So I'm going to go in with the pink white luminance pencils to start with. This is a really pale colour. I use this quite a lot as a base layer, and I always find that using luminance pencils anyway as base layers are just really good, because any layers that you add on top of that just tends to blend together a lot easier because they're so kind of buttery and soft. So what I'm going to do is just work into the entirety of the feet, both of them, work up to those little claws at the end because they're a complete different colour. And I'm applying this with a medium pressure. Now this foot is a lot more detailed than this one. This one seems to be slightly out of focus. Next up, I'm going to go in with the warm grey 3, making sure it's quite sharp, and just start to differentiate some of these shapes, like the individual sections of each foot. And go along the kind of outer edges as well. They're very like rigid and, you know, a completely different texture to both the feathers and the branch. They're kind of very much in tiny little sections, all kind of clumped together. So I'm just going along all of these little ridges, making sure I've got the right sort of direction and distance between them. It kind of reminds me of like a lizard texture, like a reptile. Not that I've ever drawn a reptile before actually, but yeah, that's kind of what it reminds me of, like scaly almost. Really rigid. And you want to do the same to the other foot. It's a bit harder to see the details on this one because, like I said before, it is slightly out of focus in comparison with this one. And then once you've mapped out all those little ridges, I'm just going to lightly shade into that to dull down the colour of the feet and start sort of mapping out where those darker shadows are amongst each of the feet as well. So kind of like in between each of the toes, if you want to call them toes. For those tiny claws, I'm going to go in with the cold grey one. I'm using it with a light to medium pressure, but you might want to release your pressure slightly where the claw is being hit by the light. So for example, on this one, I'm applying it on the left hand side of the claw and then releasing my pressure slightly. So it kind of gives that sort of 3D effect, showing how the light's hitting it at certain points as it's kind of curving round. So if you look closely at the feet, they've both got some subtle colours in there, like really subtle undertones. So I'm going to go in firstly with the light cobalt blue luminance pencil, and anywhere where I can see a little flash of blue, you want to add a little bit to those feet. So I'm adding it here, a little bit in the corner there, and to this bottom claw. And then for the other one, probably going to add a little bit to all of the claws, starting in the darkest part and kind of bringing it over about halfway. Maybe a tiny little bit there as well. I'm also briefly going to go in with the shade Sanguine, I never know how to say this one, but this little bit just underneath the branch, going to add a little bit there where it looks a bit orangey, and then anywhere else in either of the feet where you just want a subtle orange tint, this is kind of like the perfect colour to use. No more than that, I'd say. Just quickly, I am going to go in with the craft knife slice tool. Now I'm going to use this again more towards the end when we're pulling out all those details, but just to define some of these claws and kind of bring them over the branch, especially this one that seems to have got lost. Just want to bring that down over the branch to create that claw. And then the same with this one here. I'm just going to curve it round a little bit more over that branch. Like that. So back to those subtle colours then. I'm going to now use the Burnt Sienna 50%, which is a gorgeous like deep pink tone. And what I'm going to do is go over all of these little ridges first. And then I'm lightly just going to fill in where we added those subtle shadows before. And we're gradually just, you know, adding to that tonal value of the feet. Kind of just warming up that colour. Next up I'm going to go in with the Van Dyke Brown Polychromo, and again go over all these little ridges and shadows just to build up that colour and intensity a little bit more. Make sure there's a clear line as well between, or like separating the bottom edge of the foot from the branch as it's kind of gripping round. Next up I'm going to go in with the Dark Sepia Polychromo, which is a really dark brown, and really start defining all the shapes within each of the feet, going along the claws, all of those ridges, and really intensifying those shadows to kind of build that contrast a little bit more. So those feet really look like they're gripping and like sort of wrapping around that branch. So that's really defined those ridges now, and we've got a bit more of a contrast. So just to build up some of those shadows a little bit more, I'm going to go in with another brown colour, but this time slightly darker than that Van Dyke brown. This is the walnut brown. And you can actually, using a really sharp pencil, using the pointier side, just start to build up a bit of that texture as well. It's kind of like scaly. So just do loads of like small circular motions into the shadowy areas of the foot just to build up a bit of that surface texture. So even though we're drawing something that's really quite small, it's still very intricate. So it does take quite a bit of time just to be accurate and precise with where you put in all your tiny little marks and lines. And then I'm actually just going to finish off all that dark detail using the black, which is obviously the most intense colour that we can use, and really build up that contrast in those darkest points of the feet, kind of where it wraps round and where the toes are kind of really close together, creating that really dark shadow. We want the feet to look like they're above the branch and wrapping round, so really pay attention to those light and dark areas because it's where the light's hitting it that shows how it's bending, if that makes sense. Just to work into some of the claws and add a bit more of a shadow to some areas, I'm going to go in with the Slate Grey Luminance pencil, which has a slight blue tint to it. It's a little bit like a Payne's Grey. And just add that to the shadowy area of the claw. I'm just briefly going to use the white Caran d'Ache Museum aquarelle pencil to just blend and brighten parts of that claw, or all of the claws. And then just to finish off, I'm going to go in with the craft knife slice tool again and just kind of pull out little bits of highlighted texture and detail within both of the feet, predominantly focusing on this one here, which is more in focus. The tiny little details you can achieve with the craft knife slice tool is just incredible. It like elevates the realistic quality of your work to a next level, literally. It's just so good. So I'm just literally doing tiny little dots in those brightest parts of the foot to create a bit of a shine as to where the light's hitting it. And just pull out a little bit of that texture. So I'm going to leave that there, I think, for the feet. We can always go back and tweak any areas as we finish off the rest of the drawing. So the next part, we're just going to be finishing off this tail feather, which again is very much out of focus, like the bottom of the wing here. So we're going to be repeating some of those same techniques to get that out of focus, sort of blurry effect. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this shorter part where we just focused on the feet. As usual, I've left the line drawing, the full materials list and the reference photo in the video description below, so you should have everything that you need to carry on with this tutorial. If you like the drawing, then please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to see more art related content. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with the final part of this robin tutorial.